You guys know you used to be able to rent items in RuneScape? Apparently that was a thing. The lending system, loan items, that was back in 2012. I rented a P hat. Crazy. There's no way you rented a party hat, bro. That's crazy to me. You paid for it? Then you literally what? You wore it for like an hour and then gave it back? That's not real. There's a video on it. Canelo put one out. Huh. 500K an hour? There's no way. People found out how to scam it. Let's watch that. Now I'm interested.
Well-intentioned go so wrong. RuneScape's item lending update was supposed to be the safest way to share items in the game's history. Instead, it became an easy way to scam players out of billions, made the game's richest players even richer, and left everyone else stuck renting gear instead of ever owning it. How did something so well-intentioned go so wrong? And why was it never removed? To understand why the item lending system was added to RuneScape, a bit of brief context is needed. At the end of 2007, right when the game was at the peak of its popularity, Jagex introduced two updates that decimated the game's population. First, they turned the Wilderness, the heart of the game's player versus player community, into a safe zone, where fighting players was no longer possible. Second, they removed free trade, so players could no longer give or trade items without strict limits. If you wanted to trade,
that's still crazy to me that happened. They removed PvP and trading from the game for a bit, and everybody quit. That is crazy that I can say that out loud. That like they thought that was a good idea because that's how they were going to get rid of the bots.
Trade something, the other player had to offer items or gold of similar or equal value. Both updates were designed to cut down on bots and stop real-world trading, the practice of buying and selling in-game wealth for real money. Without the Wilderness and free trade, real-world trading became almost impossible, and botting lost much of its purpose. But these updates also destroyed some of RuneScape's best features. No more massive wars in the Wilderness, no more adrenaline rush from risking everything in a fight and winning, and no more sharing gifts with friends or receiving help from generous strangers. But I suppose it made scamming almost impossible, so that's nice. If only it didn't take removing the game's most popular features.
We did it, Patrick! We saved the city!
Jagex knew that players would be devastated and wanted to give them alternatives. Powerful revenants now roamed the Wilderness to replace the danger of player killers. You could fight others.
Wait, revenants were not always in the Rev Cave? They were just kind of out in the wilderness, roaming around? That's strange.
In the new Bounty Hunter minigame, or continue warring with your clan in Clan Wars. None of these really scratched the same itch as the old Wilderness, but at least it was something. When it came to free trade, though, there was nothing. No replacement, no workaround, and no way to help players who just wanted to share their items. The only exception to this was that the more quest points you had, the more unbalanced your trades could be, but only by a very small amount. For example, if you had 200 quest points or more, you were allowed to give an item up to 30,000 coins more valuable than whatever you got in return. In other words, you could generously help your friend afford maybe half of a rune plate body? And because this limit reset every 15 minutes, the most you could ever transfer was 120,000 GP per hour. It would be more than 6 months after free trade was removed before Jagex introduced any kind of solution for the players who missed it.
Wait, so you could trade, but you could only trade a 30,000 gold differences every 15 minutes. That is the strangest thing. I did not know about that.
Not only was it introduced way too late, it brought with it more issues than it solved. And trust me, it only gets crazier from here. But first, hear me out for just a minute. Imagine a game with AAA graphics, over 5 million active players, and enough content to keep you hooked forever.
Raid
You've
Shadow
probably
Legends?
heard of it, maybe even played it, but now is the perfect time to jump in. It's today's sponsor, Raid Shadow Legends. I've been having a lot of fun with the campaign mode, but the later levels can be kind of tough. That's where having powerful sponsoring this video, and now let's get back to the story. On July 14th, 2008, item lending was added to RuneScape, a simple system designed to let you share items with your friends. It worked like this. The item's owner would use their item on the player they wanted to lend it to. An interface would pop up where they could choose how long to lend the item for, which at the time was up to 24 hours. After selecting the duration, the item would be transferred to the other player's inventory. When time was up, the owner could reclaim their item from any banker, or if they didn't want to wait, they could demand it back early. It was a simple system that on paper worked pretty well, but there were a few oversights that Jagex didn't account for. Most of these oversights were pretty silly. For example, if an item's owner loaned a piece of headgear like a party hat and then reclaimed it from a banker, it would instantly turn the borrower bald. Or if a player was wearing a borrowed item and opened the player-owned house off.
I mean, dude, sometimes you just randomly go bald. And I mean, it happened to me. And I'm just saying, like, it's not that bad. Like, it could be worse, you know?
Options menu and the owner demanded the item back, the borrower would still appear to be wearing it until they clicked something. It was a pretty handy trick for anyone who wanted to stand around the Grand Exchange all day looking cool without actually paying for a full day's loan, until they misclicked by mistake. The biggest oversight at the time, however, wasn't a glitch. It's that Jagex, for some reason, didn't expect players to use this system to make money, and as a result, didn't design it for that. Instead of loaning items to their friends for free, players would go to the Grand Exchange and advertise that they were loaning out their items for a small fee. The borrowers would trade the item's owner some GP to borrow the item, and then the item's owner would loan it out to them. The problem with this is that the borrower would trade the GP over first and hope that the item's owner didn't scam them. Once the item's owner had the GP, they could just teleport away with the borrower's money and not loan them the item. Or if we're getting really high level, a scammer could borrow an item from another player and pretend that they're the real owner of that item. For example, a scammer could borrow a blue party hat, equip it, and then start advertising that they were loaning it out. Players would trade over their money, and the scammer would hop worlds and repeat the scam. However, this wasn't super widespread because remember that there was a trade limit in place. Realistically, item owners could only charge item borrowers about 30,000 GP at the most, and that's if they had enough quest points for the trade to be that unbalanced. Players would eventually find much more dangerous scams using the lending system, but we're not quite there yet. In the meantime, item owners were looking for
Damn, they could scam you, but they could only scam you for 25K. That sucks, man. Damn, even the scammers were down bad in this time.
ways to make more than just 30,000 GP from lending out their items. As you probably know, RuneScape players are incredibly inventive, so they quickly found a workaround to make boatloads more. Item owners would pad their trades with junk items, things the Grand Exchange valued highly, but were practically worthless and easy to obtain for much less than their Grand Exchange price. Junk items were usually things with very low demand but extremely high supply, like unstrung short bows or poisoned arrows. Because the Grand Exchange still showed them as valuable, they were perfect for inflating the total trade value. If an item's owner wanted to charge 1,000,000 coins to loan out their blue party hat, they'd just add 1,000,000 coins worth of junk to the trade, and the borrower could pay them the full amount with no issue. This all led to a problem that RuneScape had never seen before. The Grand Exchange, which was meant to be a marketplace for buying and selling, was now filled with players offering to rent out their gear instead. Jagex never intended for people to sit there spamming rental offers and making millions without ever risking or using their items. It created an obvious divide between the
What do you mean? What did the loaner system, what was the main point of it? How did they not see that coming? I mean, people are going to, if you can allow people to rent stuff out, they're going to rent out every single thing they possibly can. I mean, that's what I would do. I rent my whole bank out.
The haves and the have-nots. The wealthiest players could generate unlimited passive income just by owning rare items, while everyone else was stuck paying rent and never getting the chance to own them at all. Instead of items flowing naturally through the economy, they were locked away in the hands of a few players who had no incentive to sell them. But this wasn't something
they thought we were going to lend them out to our friends. That was their first mistake. They thought we had friends.
Jagex could just fix overnight. It was an unintended consequence of the lending system being added to the game, so they had to embrace it. 2 weeks after lending was introduced to RuneScape, they would publish a news post that said this: "Over the last couple of weeks, many players have been using the item lending system to lend out items for profit. That's not really what we designed the system to achieve. It was intended to be a simple way for players to once again share objects with their friends. Since some players seem so keen to rent out their valuable items though, we've adjusted the system to let them do it safely. Now, instead of item owners using their items on the player they wanted to lend the item to, they would do it through the trade system. Every trade screen now had a little loan box. This way players could loan an item and exchange money for it all in one go. This system worked quite well and would quickly fuel the growth of the new item lending market. As the ease to lend items increased, item lenders would become much more organized. They would
Bro, how would you get the item back from that guy though? Would it automatically appear back in your inventory after a certain amount of time? Whether you were near them or not, or if they were logged in or not? It's automatic. Okay, because I was about to say, because you could just take a loan and then never log back in.
would all start to gather in the northwest corner of the Grand Exchange on World 2, so it would be simple for customers to find them. If you had the right items, you could now easily make millions of GP every day, basically doing nothing but spamming. Over the next few years, the lending system wouldn't receive any major controversies, but in 2011, some big changes came to RuneScape that would bring lending back into the spotlight. On December 17, 2010, then CEO Mark Gerhard would make a news post simply titled "Wilderness and Free Trade Vote." In the post, he acknowledged that removing free trade in the wilderness back in 2007 had taken away something special from RuneScape. Despite all of the alternative content Jagex had added to replace them, he explained that while these changes helped fight bots and real-world trading, many players still felt the game had lost its soul. So he announced a community vote to decide whether to bring back free trade in the original wilderness, fully aware it would reopen the door to many of the same problems they had before. But this time, he felt that Jagex had the tools to tackle them properly.
I wonder how the botting situation was during this. Do you think that there was just like no bots at all when they got rid of trading? Or do they still exist? Because that was obviously their goal, was to stop real world trading. So they just completely shut down real world trading and then there were still bots. So it didn't work.
When the poll launched, more than 1.2 million players cast their vote within 24 hours, and the overwhelming majority said that they wanted the wilderness and free trade to return. Then on February 1st, 2011, the changes went live. Both the wilderness and free trade were officially back in RuneScape. But what did these changes mean for the lending system? Well, it solved some.
Back in the day, it was way less bots, but it was mostly actual players who botted to train. I ain't gonna lie, guys. I may or may not have used the auto clicker to level my fishing when I was 12.
Problems, it also created plenty of new ones. Let's start with the good stuff first. Now you no longer had to pad your trades with junk items. That's about it. On to the bad stuff. In an interview Ash did on the Sebecast, he mentioned that Jagex started to wonder what these item owners who were making millions from lending out their items were actually doing with all of the money that they had earned. Perhaps they used it to fund training their more expensive skills, or reinvested it into new items they could loan out. It was unfortunately, in most cases, neither of those. Ash speculated that they were instead real-world trading the gold. So now, not only did RuneScape have a system where the wealthiest players could generate endless passive income just by owning rare items, but the gold they earned was also likely flowing straight into underground real-world trading markets. Items were still locked away in the hands of a few people who had no reason to sell them, and instead of circulating through the economy, they became tools to farm real money outside of the game. But I'd argue that that wasn't even the largest issue that the lending system caused after free trade in the wilderness returned. This is Bill. He's been lending out his blue party hat for a while now, and has made quite a bit of money doing so. But today is different. A player walks up to him and asks to borrow his party hat. Bill
Okay.
agrees, and the player pays him. After doing so, the player chats with Bill a little bit about what he plans to use the party hat for while he has it. It turns out he's filming a RuneScape music video, and asks if Bill would like to join. Bill has always wanted to be in one of those videos, and
Okay.
quickly agrees. The player says they need to film a scene in the wilderness, which should be a big red flag, but Bill is smart. He'll just bank all of his items, so if he dies in the wilderness, he won't lose any.
Oh, and the party hat goes back to him after the 15 minutes, and then he kills him. I'm on to it.
They head out to the wilderness, and the player asks Bill to attack him. Now, when he does, Bill becomes Scold. If you attack someone in the wilderness unprovoked, you become Scold, meaning if you die, you lose all of the items you're carrying, instead of getting to keep the most valuable 3. But again, Bill brought nothing, so that doesn't matter. The two players fight each other for a while, and when Bill gets low on health, the other player does something tricky. He uses the blue party hat he borrowed on Bill, instantly returning the item to him. The player
Whoa.
then kills Bill, and Bill's party hat drops to the ground, where the player can now steal it. It's a pretty clever scam, as I
Wow.
imagine most players didn't even know that you could return an item simply by using it on its
That's
owner.
really smart,
But
guys.
this wasn't the only scam involving the lending system that players would
I definitely could have got triumphant with that scam.
discover. Now, I mentioned a moment ago that when you're
too bad it's
Scold,
not in the
if
game
you
anymore.
die, everything on you drops to the ground. There is one exception to this. If you pray the protect item prayer, you get to keep your most valuable item, unless you currently have a lent item on you. If you die while Scold with a Bandos chestplate that you own and a bronze dagger that was loaned to you, you'll lose the chestplate and keep the dagger, as lent items, regardless of their value, are protected first on death. Again, this was something that players likely didn't know, and scammers would use all sorts of tactics to take advantage of this. This is definitely not the direction that Jagex hoped the lending system would go. What was supposed to be a simple feature to let friends borrow items from each other had become an absolute mess, filled with hoarders, scammers, and real-world traders. It was quietly ruining RuneScape, and
Why is scamming a thing, guys? Like, why are we as like humanity just pieces of shit? So many people are. You guys ever think about that? Like, what the hell is wrong with us, man? Why are we always trying to do the sleaziest shit to get ahead? It's just built into our DNA. I don't know, man. The greed goes kind of crazy.
most players had no idea. Fast forwarding to today, item lending in RuneScape 3 still exists, but it's a rarely used system today. These days, most of the best gear in the game is either degradable or can be augmented using the invention skill. Items that are augmented or degradable can't be lent. But what about rare items like party hats? Well, they're also lent out much less frequently. RuneScape 3 has a system where you can keepsake an item, meaning that no matter what gear you're actually wearing, your character can appear to be wearing the keepsaked item. Once an item is keepsaked, it can no longer be traded or lent, and most rare item owners have them keepsaked, so they can show off regardless of what skill they're training. The many issues item lending once caused on RuneScape didn't end because of any major update. They mostly just faded away on their own as the game evolved. Jumping over to old school RuneScape, it's unlikely that item lending will ever be added to this version of the game. Its developers have turned down the idea multiple times, and after watching this video,
Good.
I think you can understand why. Check out the video on the right about R2 Pleasant. He was one of RuneScape's greatest merchants and managed to turn the half jug of wine.
That the whole reason I became a streamer was so I could convince people to lend me their items and I would pay them back. But then I don't. You know what I mean? What if this was all just some elaborate scam? You know what I mean? Like the whole thing was just to get people to trust me and to letting me borrow their items. That'd be crazy. Oh man, that was a good video by Canelo. That's a lot of streamers when they were at the duel arena was a thing. What they would stream and get you to lend them some money and be like, I'm a streamer, I'll pay you back, you can trust me. And then they would just quit streaming after you gave them their money, after you gave them some money. Oh, hell nah. That was Odablock? Bro. Odablock did that? Unbelievable.